I wanted to talk to everybody today about atoms and resonance. I was originally just going to talk about energy, and I realized that this thing goes a lot deeper than what we think it does. Let's think about this. You look at the definition for energy, and it's simply that something is doing work. Okay, something's in motion creates an energy, right? That's what they define it as in physics. So let's go a little bit deeper. We had an atom structure. We have a proton and electron. That's what everybody sees it as. But is the proton sitting still? Is the electron always there? You see, this goes to the fundamental nature of an atom. When you want to see it correctly, if everything to get energy is something that has to do work, then the electron must come after the proton is there. That seems pretty simple. You get something that's in work, it creates energy. So if you have proton, it creates an electron. It means that everything in this entire universe and everything that's ever been created comes from the proton, which is something that's in movement, and it creates energy. That seems pretty simple. How it does it originally, we don't know. But let's just take it as fact that we can understand that something has to be in movement to create energy. Is the electron actually a little ball? You see, we always think it is, and we think it's always rotating right around the proton, but is that an incorrect assumption? You see, when we look at an atom through an electron microscope, we're seeing the outside shell of an atom. You're not seeing the proton and neutron, you're seeing the outside shell. So let's dig a little deeper. How do you get a shell out of two spherical objects rotating around each other? Is that possible? We don't see it in nature that way. Nothing that we build builds out that way. So, what if we just changed it slightly? I'm not saying that the two processes don't work. I'm just saying, what if we change it slightly to change our outlook on how things are working? What if that electron was built out in simply just a field? I mean, think about this. If your proton's doing work and it's in some form of oscillation, going back and forth, is all I'm saying, just going back and forth, okay? It's in some kind of movement. Maybe it's in a spherical movement. We don't know, okay? I'm just saying it maybe just spins. If it's doing that, if it simply spins, what would happen? Well, if that motion creates the electron, now it would come out in a spherical shell. Now, just understand this. It would first come out in energy, just like rotating a magnet, and then build out. Then you would create what is known as the energy right there in the shell. Okay? So, what happens in nature? Everything tries to equalize itself. So, as it tries to equalize itself, you're going to get a counter rotating shell on the outside. That specifically would make our shells that we see as atoms. Electron microscopes clearly just shows it as a shell. That's what they show the atom as. They're not showing it as proton and neutrons or even electrons. They're showing it as shells. So we have to understand how you build that out. Now, I know I just changed fundamentally how you see this thing, but there's a good reason for it. You see, when we look at an electron and we look at AC and DC and power and stuff like that, it's actually the impedance in the system. It's creating an electricity ball of energy that's slowing things down because it's consuming the energy. It's not because that's what we want to do, but that's what it's doing. So when we push things in positive, it creates extra energy in the system, which it's pulling from, which enables the heat to happen, which causes hysteresis in the system. But let's go back to the atom. The neutron itself has to do work. It has to. It has to fundamentally start by doing work. Therefore, it must build out the electron around it. If we simply said it was spinning, then it would make an understandable thing that the energy pulls out from that and spins with it. When we split atoms, we split them based on resonance. Now, that seems kind of odd, but if you see the atom as doing work already, and then it's in a shell, it means that anything like it that wants to get near it would connect to it. Therefore, two atoms together are still doing work together, but they're in a state of harmony. They're not in a state of dissonance. They are harmonious to each other. It's coherence. They stay in that state, but they're still doing work. We always see things in the form of yin and yang. We're not seeing the shell around the yin and yang, is I think what I'm trying to get at to you. We're not understanding it properly. So, why would resonance play a part here? Well, if you say that they're all stuck together, right? But the original part that you created is in a oscillation state, anything with oscillation that matches that state would cause the energy to increase. We see that in daily life as we do things. So if that energy increases, what happens between the atoms is they start to become unstable to each other because you added more energy than the system likes to allow. Now they become in a vibration state to each other. Once you do that, you can break the coherence. Once you break the coherence, you get into distortion. Once you get into distortion, things break apart. You split the atom. Atoms aren't very good at splitting, so they like to stay together. So it's very, very difficult to do it. Now that we understand a little bit more about this, and I know I'm changing things completely for a lot of people, but it goes down to how things are fundamentally working. How can you tear something apart? Well, you can do it with resonance. It's literally pulling the atoms from each other. Now, they'll try to go back to each other. You could see them as a rubber band. As soon as they go back to each other and they come back together, they explode, right? That's the way we try to see it. We try to see a nuclear reaction that way. We're using resonance in order to break things. We're trying to understand things on a different level. This is why our brains aren't comprehending what the world actually is. If you could see the atom in the way that I described it, and you can see it breaking apart the way that I describe it, you can start to see the fundamental nature of what's really going on. Everything is in motion at all times. We see things as mass, but they are still in motion at every point. So now when we want to break apart that mass or move that mass, we have to see it as an energy state. You see, we get caught up in, hey, is it basically just a rock? Well, it's built up of atoms. We just don't know how to communicate with it at this point. That's the fundamental understanding of this. If you want to get into anti-gravity, why is resonance the key factor? It's because it creates distortion. It's creating distortion in order to make these atoms themselves more energized. Now we get into a state where you can actually see this as working versus it not working. When you see things as just a rock, you misunderstand the rock. Every atom's in motion. Every atom at every time has an energy field inside of it. If you amplify any part of that energy field, you now have a state where you can cause distortion between the atoms. When you cause distortion between the atoms, you're causing resonance. When you cause resonance in there, you're disturbing its nature. You're taking the electrical value of that and increasing it. Now it's in an energy state. Makes more sense, doesn't it? You see, if you see things as just a rock, you'll never be able to move the rock. We know that that's not true. You can move the rock. And I'm not talking picking it up and putting it down somewhere else. You see things throughout history that are telling you this, that things are in a vibratory nature, they actually move. They actually lose the ability to have gravity to them. Why? Because gravity is just an energy force. That's what it is. It's built up of energy. You would say it's mass, but what's mass? Well, if we take mass as what it is, it's an atom, but every atom's built in an energy state. So what is it actually? We're actually talking about energy the whole time. We define it differently because once things accumulate together, we see them as mass, but you're actually still just talking about energy states. Interesting, isn't it? If you have this in your head and you can't get it out, that a rock is just a rock, we'll never move forward in understanding gravity or any other thing. You have to see the original atom and the original proton is in an A oscillation state. Therefore, it builds out the electron from it. And we just deal with shells. Atoms are simply shells. They piece together in order to create matter. That's what we're seeing. It's an energy state. We live in a continuously state of energy that repeats itself over and over and over again. The world wasn't hard to understand. It's that we overcomplicate the answer. When a couple words will do, we use a million. That's our problem. We're not thinking through what we're actually saying. An atom's far different than what you probably think it is. They combine together. They always want to go back to a certain state. If it's a single atom, it always wants to combine with something until you get something else. But if you want to break them apart, you create distortion in between it. Why does resonance create distortion? Because it creates a state of energy that is amplifying the energy in the original part that you had. So if you said you had these atoms in a certain energy state, which they're in, and they're in coherence with each other, what do I want to do to break them apart? Do I create more coherence? No, I create distortion. I'm going to create more energy of the same exact type over here so that this over here will distort and break apart. That's what I want to do. Now, what happens? When you break the bonds of an atom and they pull apart, they lose the ability to stay together. So it's like a bunch of little pebbles. And when you put them together, you got this nice big rock. But when you break it back down to pebbles, each one of them is light. As soon as you do this, you're changing the ability for it to stay into gravity. You're changing its mass. You're changing what people usually consider weight. Just understand that. How densely packed is it? That's your density, right? Break it apart. Doesn't matter how dense it is. It is now in a state where it's in distortion. All the energy around it has multiplied. Once you multiply the energy around it, it can no longer stay in coherence. Therefore, it must separate. Not permanently. They go to a state of moving apart, but they're not permanently separated. You're just moving them apart at a distance because you're creating more energy between them. When you create more energy between them, it causes resistance between them. That resistance between them pulls them apart. But it never puts it in a state where it's completely broken. We're not splitting the atoms, we're just moving them apart. That's why resonance has always been the key to anti-gravity. Gravity is simply an energy field. It's a state of energy. So when you pull these things apart, you can defeat it every time. We get into every little thing. Is it a particle? You know what I mean? Is it an Evo? Whatever, ball lightning. You keep coming up with a different name for everything that probably describes the same thing. They're just in a different state than you think they are. So you give it a different name. I got a white golf ball here, so my white golf ball is named Bob, and I got an orange golf ball and it's named Larry, and then I got a black golf ball, it's named Joe. I mean, you're just going off naming things, and you're just describing them because they changed just a little bit. I think it's ironic that people don't see it this way, but I guess it's because we got so many things hammered into our head that we can't think for ourselves. And when you can't think for yourself, then you'll never get to the state of understanding anything further because you're just repeating it. You're a regurgitation machine. You think that you have your own clear thought, but then when your mouth opens, you said the same thing the other guy said. Then what the other guy said. Then what the other guy said. But you're not coming up with the original thought. You know, I'm telling this to people so that they can understand energy and everything in a different way. I want you to be able to do these things, and I want us to succeed as a society. Therefore, we must start to see things differently. Everything's in a state of motion. Oh, it's crazy. People see the things a little differently than I do. They say God spoke and created, the universe and everything. What does that actually mean? Well, when you speak, you just come out with a certain frequency. But that frequency is an emotion yet. You got to create the motion with it. It must have a counterpart in this. It must do work. It must create both sides of the sine wave, not just one. That's why people talk about cosmic mirrors and stuff like that, because it must be spoken into something. Once you spoke it into it, you create a state of energy that's continuous. That's the point. You're putting it into a continuous state of energy. Otherwise, it just goes away. Think about what you say, because you have to define it in a way that makes sense to energy. See, this is what gets me about different theories. I just told you how to take string theory, which is resonance, how to take electrical theory, which is energy, and how to take any kind of Newtonian physics or atoms. They're all the same thing. They're all built out in the same way. People say they're debunking it, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's hilarious. You don't see it. You don't see that they're all working together in coherence. You think that they're all separate. You think that you're so smart going out to debunk something instead of realizing that they're all working together. All of these theories have their own merit, and they're all working together because of the basic nature of what an atom is, how it works, and how it pulls things apart. I try to describe it in other ways using other words, and I lose a lot of people along the way because they have their defined understanding of what the word is. But when you really break it down to what's going on, we can see the truth. The truth is everything is in motion. Therefore, there's a state of movement going inside your proton, and it allows for the electron to build out. But then we build a shell around it because it's trying to go against itself to create balance in nature. When it does that, you get shells, and those we know as atoms. And our electron microscope picks up shells. The shells cohere to each other, and once they do, they're in a state of being blessed. They're in coherence. Now that they're in coherence, in order to break that coherence, we must have distortion. That's not that hard. I think it's pretty simple, actually. We get further when we think for ourselves and understand things differently. When you go along with the same jargon, it reaches a point where it becomes delusional. Can't use a million words to describe something that should only take maybe 50. Once you do, you've overcomplicated it. There's no reason to do it. You just like to do it. We do that as a society. We use giant words in order to describe a single word that's maybe 4 letters. I try in my whole channel here to get you guys to understand things in simple words so that we all can enjoy it. We all like to learn. We all take it as a good thing, but when you make it overly complicated, nobody wants to learn it. Nobody. You get lost in a definition instead of listening to what's going on. I guess it's the nature of human beings, huh? But what can we do with this now if we understand it in this particular way, the way I described it, right? What does that mean? It means that there's a way to create anti-gravity at all times. That's what it means. It means that you are literally controlling nature at this point. How things are built, how things are structured, how things work. Let me go into another part of this and get people to understand this in another way. Maybe it's an example you need and how it builds out in nature so that we can see it. Okay. We can look at magnets for a null zone. We can look at, creating energy in Tesla coils, which it's hard to relate to if you've never done it. Uh, but you built out a null zone. What's in the null zone? It's a curious question. I have people that tell me that there's one thing in there. I think that there's two things in there. Could any of us be right? But if we go back to the fundamental understanding of the atom, there must be something in there doing work. At least one thing in there doing work. But what does it create? It creates from it an outside shell. The outside shell is full with energy. You see, you may think it's null in the inside, but there's always something in there doing work. Always something. Something is in a state of motion in there. That's how it's created. How did we do it? Well, if you look at coils, it's real simple. You created a resonant state. It found something that was resonant to it, a single frequency that was resonant to it, and it started to create it in motion. That's pretty simple. It built out a null zone, so there must be an energy state on the outside or a shell, and on the outside shell of it must be energy. But what is it trying to do? You see, let's look at the magnet example for it. Energy is always trying to create a state of balance. So what is it doing? It's creating an outside shell, just like your atom. It's doing it in a bigger way or a smaller way, depending on how you see it, but it's still doing the same thing. It's still trying to create a state of balance. So it's trying to pull in. You wonder why the dielectric on the magnets, when you put them together, is like this, and then all of a sudden they shrink to this, because they're trying to go in and coalesce around that null zone. When we see it in coils, we think of something different. We think that it has a vortex up and a vortex down. It's trying to equal itself and create that shell. It's trying to create the atom. It's just doing it all over again. Again and again and again, it's still working the same way. We see it build out and we're not understanding it correctly. When I tell you things work in a beat frequency to each other, it's like two atoms sitting next to each other. There's a dielectric that builds in between them. That's your beat frequency. That's how they get to hold each other together. Think about it. You have two atoms, you have two things in a certain state. They create a dielectric between them. That's the energy between them holding the bond together, right? Is it that hard? The two energy states creating together. It's trying to create a bond. They got a dielectric between them. All of it's right there. All of it. It's repeating itself, and we're failing to see the repeating pattern because we give it every name in the book. Everything has a brand new name to it, but it's not. It's just things building out at a bigger scale. It continues to scale itself. So what is geometry? Geometry is just a single point, right? Single point that builds out the multiple points. So why would I say resonance is the key to understanding this? Well, it goes to the atom. If you build out a single point, an atom is a single point, right? You continue to add to that point, you add different points to it, right? You add more atoms to it. As you build more atoms to it, it builds out a structure, right? Then, as soon as you put resonance into it, okay, from the outside into it, it pulls itself apart, but it always pulls itself apart equally. Therefore, it builds a geometry structure from it. There are single points in space that can be moved apart to create a geometry. Now, when you look at things built in nature under electron microscope, that makes sense because we see them incorrectly. Our eyes are playing tricks on it because our eyes blend everything. But when you put it under an electron microscope, you see things for what they are. They're building out structure. They're building geometry patterns, every single one of them. They're simply points in a space that are a null zone. We call them a null zone because it's another way to make the primordial atom. There it is for you. We keep calling them different things and it's screwing up how we see it. That's why I'm frustrated when we want everybody's same definition because the definition isn't working. So why would I want to use it? If you can understand this, then geometry structures make a whole lot of sense for the entire universe because now everything builds out in geometry. Everything. It all has a geometrical structure based on the amount of atoms that you put into it. There you go. Things have a beat frequency between them. The beat frequency is your dielectric. It is a state where it holds it at a distance. So when you pull them apart, your dielectric is sending a beat frequency between the two. It's interacting. When you pull them apart, they coalesce a little bit and they try to make another atom inside of it. And it becomes a replication process. It creates one to the next to the next to the next. And based on how you pull it out and where the energy goes and where it sits in coherence, gives you the exact geometry structure. Think about that the next time you look at a flower, because that's what it is. The universe isn't random, it's patterns. Everything builds in patterns. It all goes back to the basic original structure of the atom. If you can see the proton continuously doing work from the original state, the electron always builds out from it. Not as a little ball, but as a field of energy. As a field of energy, it creates the shell on the outside. Those shells is what we see under the electron microscope. They coalesce together in order to create a geometrical pattern. The way to break the pattern is with resonance because you're creating distortion. You're ruining the coherence in between them. Now we can start to get on to the real deal. Can we create anti-gravity knowingness? The answer is yes. And as a matter of fact, it was easier than we thought it was. You want another example? Let's look at this. Take a crystal structure, connect a piezoelectric buzzer to it, then go put it on your frequency generator. Run the frequencies. When you run the frequencies on this thing, you're going to find a state where this crystal is now in an oscillatory fashion. You have now created the resonance. That resonance will now make that crystal itself jump all over the table. You are exciting the energy inside the atom of that crystal in order to make it come out in a vibrational state because it's overloading the amount of energy inside of it. It shakes like crazy, but then it starts to produce energy. And you say, well, why is it producing energy? Because when you're in a vibration state like that and you're triggering it, you're triggering everything to amplify the energy inside of it. Once you amplify the energy inside of it, the energy cannot be sustained inside of itself. Therefore, it has to come out. That's why we have piezoelectricity. You say, well, I strike it with a hammer and I can see the piezoelectricity. Yeah, you can. You're creating a distortion frequency inside of that crystal itself that actually will give you an energy state. You could do it to any rock. I mean, this isn't the only thing you can do it with. Just strike your hammer on a rock. You're going to get electricity. Is it harder to get it out of the rock than it is the piezo? Sure. But that all has to do with the distance they're created apart and the structure, the geometry structure built inside of each one of them. Energy's everywhere. If you understand how it bonds together, you can understand how to separate it and how to pull the energy from it. You just have to create a state in which it's in distortion in order to do it. Sometimes we get this thing backwards. We think we always want to create coherence, and sometimes we don't. Energy states are about distortion. They're not about coherence. We get coherence in a shell because it tries to equalize the state of distortion. Nature doesn't like to be out of balance. Nature likes to be in balance. It'll do everything it can to possibly put something back into balance. And because of that, we build out structure. So if I give you an example, saying we got horses on a bridge, what am I saying to you? We're creating a frequency. We're creating several frequencies. Every time a hoof hits the ground, one frequency, two frequencies, three frequencies, four frequencies. We have two states of frequencies that are working together in resonance. So you got one resonance state and another resonance state. What is it doing? It creates a pulse of energy. It's that pulse of energy that's pulling things apart. It's created more energy into it. You see, that's the thing. You got to a state where the energy itself couldn't be self-contained anymore. So what does it do? It creates that beat. That beat. It's pulling apart and putting it back together. Pulling apart, putting it back together. You're creating a beat. You're not allowing it to sit together. It's trying to pull apart every time you put distortion in it, but nature tries to pull it back. You're creating the beat. You're creating a ratio. You are literally breaking it down. It cannot stay that way. If it's in a continuous state where it's trying to create distortion in it, it cannot stay in a state of coherence. It must pull itself apart. It's going to continue to grow. Because if everything around it in atoms is the same type of atom and you're still working on the same structure, it's going to go until the thing disintegrates where it can no longer have an energy state and don't go back to its fundamental form. It's easy to not that hard. This is one of the things when you look at piezoelectric itself, it can't create the energy itself. It needs an outside source. You need to activate it in some way. On this channel, we always talk about the water being the activation factor. Why? Because water gets in everything. Water gets in everything. But it causes, because water has energy in it, it's creating a bit of a distortion in your crystal because your atoms are a little further apart. So it's creating a bit of distortion in your crystal. So in some crystals, you get a point of energy that comes out already as soon as you put it into water. You start to get a frequency and an energy signal out of it. You'll start to build out a field. That's that distortion state of the water that has the energy inside of it. Water always has energy in it. Always. It it makes too much sense, doesn't it? You get yourself in a conflict. If you try to name things all day, then this makes no sense to you. If you can understand how energy flows and how it moves around things and how it works, you'll start to understand this. The ether is a continuous state of energy. That's a fact. Whether you say black hole, white hole, doesn't matter to me. It's all the ether. There's always a system trying to correct itself. It's always a system that tries to go in balance. People think ether is a bad term. It's a correct term. It's energy. It's all around us. It always has been. It's a sea of energy Tesla talked about. It's literally everywhere. Is it dark matter energy? Yes, it is. It's all out there. The space in between planets still has energy. It's in a compressed state where you're not going to be able to find it because you don't know how to talk to the energy. You don't know how to activate the energy. It's all building out the same way. Why is the moon coupled to the earth? Why are each planet coupled to the sun the same way? Why did they build out at a distance? Think about it. You had two atoms and you put them together. You create a distortion in order for them to separate. We are in a complete distortion state when you go to look at where the planets are. They separate based on that distortion state and the amount of energy going into each one. So they build out continuously from each other. That's why everybody assumes that there's two suns in every single solar system. They think that you need two things to create work when you only need one. It all builds out in fields from it. So if you say we're in an ether, we're in a continuous state of trying to create an atom. It's just bigger. That's it. Nature keeps repeating itself and it keeps telling you it's repeating itself and you're not listening. You want to come up with 5,000 different names for something, but it's all a repeating pattern. Why does it look different to you? Because every time that you add more energy into it, it looks different. When you amplify one part of the energy, it looks different. If I amplify the radiant part of the field, which I'm just saying the energy builds out, if it builds out more, then the other part of the fields are different. My amount of magnetism and static electricity will change in the system. It'll look different every single time. Therefore, you give it a different name. But is it? No. It's still trying to build out. It's just bigger. We see the effects more when they get bigger. I always say to people, high voltage tells no lies. And it's because it's telling you what you're doing in a big state versus a small state. When you get to lower amounts of energy, you think it works one way, but it's just the same way as it does when it does in high voltage. High voltage simply reveals it. It tells you how it likes to work because now you can see it. Your eyeballs are not playing tricks on you. Your eyeballs are now working for you. High voltage reveals the state that it's in, but that state was originally there when it was in small amount of voltage. You couldn't see it. That's why the interaction's the same. We have to see the atom a little bit differently in order to understand it correctly. It's always trying to replicate itself. You put two atoms further apart, you're going to get a null zone. When you get a null zone, it's trying to create another atom. It's trying to replicate. We see it in creatures. Oh man, we had a cell division. Okay, well, in your body, how many cell divisions have you gone through? It's continuously trying to replicate itself again and again and again and again. We're looking and breaking down how it's trying to pull itself apart and replicate. We're actually getting insight into how to see it. We're not recognizing that that's what it is. We're seeing it in different ways, but that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to replicate itself. And when you get that insight, now you get to the real understanding of things. I don't know. One day we'll get there. I see this world completely differently than I think 99% of the people out there. And maybe that makes me wrong in every single way. Maybe it makes me right in some ways. I can't see it any other way because this is everything that it keeps telling us it's doing. And if it keeps telling you it's doing something, it's about time you listen. I think that all we have to do to create any type of anti-gravity is that distortion. That distortion in the atoms will take care of itself because it'll build out a field from it. And when it builds a field out from it, it builds a shell out from it. And then they get into counter rotation, they get into time dilation. It's going to create itself. It's literally going to create itself. We break it down into different parts and try to, change how things are working. We're not seeing it the right way. If we saw it the right way, we'd understand how to break it down and change it, wouldn't we? We would really start to see how we could change it. Distortion inside of it. Pull those atoms apart in a fundamental nature. Just yank them apart. What does it do? It creates a tremendous amount of energy. Think about it. If you have all this energy that's holding one atom to the next, and you're creating a distortion, which means that you're pulling that energy apart, what happens when it snaps? Think about it. What happens when it snaps? It's like your rubber band snapping. You're automatically, boom, you get a burst of energy because that energy has to go somewhere, right? As soon as you pull them apart, you get a burst of energy. That's when you can split them. In anti-gravity, you never want to split them. That's the wrong process. You simply want to pull them apart and use that distortion in order to take the mass and separate it. You're not separating them permanently. You're not doing it in a way you could probably visually see it. But every tiny little small atom, man, one to the next, are pulling apart slightly. It loses its density. Once it loses its density, it loses what you call weight. Now we can understand gravity as a state of energy. The state of energy is always pulling upon you. That's not hard. It's not hard at all. It's all a state of energy. Energy is defined as something that's doing work. Atoms always do work. Okay. Now we're just looking at how they work together, how they, get in coherence, how that we put them in distortion, how that we can change how things work. Abnormalities happen all the time in nature where you get an extra clove. You got a 3-leaf clover all the time, then you get a 4-leaf clover every once in a while. That happens all the time. All the time. You talk about a DNA chain and stuff like that, you think it's any different? No. Certain things turn on when they need to turn on. That's the way they work because you've reached a different state on the outside. Think about it. If your environmental condition changes, what happens to your body? Your body changes with it. It may take a generation or two to do it, or it may only take less than that. Your body's going to try to match the environmental condition because you created a different energy state. Once you create a different energy state, then it tries to manipulate your DNA itself to create that energy state. Not difficult. We're going to evolve that way. As this planet changes, so are we. We are 100% tied to our planet. Any condition we create on another planet, you're going to have to try to match this one, or else we're going to have problems. It also makes things easier. Now that you see it this way, can we create gravity on the opposite end of it? Sure we can. Sure we can. Anyway, this is just my thoughts, my ideas. It's a different way of looking at the entire structure of things. And like I said, you can think I'm 100% wrong, and I'm okay with that. But this is the way I see it. I see things differently than everybody, and I always have. And because of that, it's allowed me to do a lot of different things in the lab that most people wouldn't be able to do. I'm passing the information along to you guys so that you guys can do the same thing. Even if it sparks and triggers an idea to come out with something else, at least you understand it. I only ask that you reduce the amount of words and names that you give things because everybody wants to enjoy this process as much as you. And we do not need school level pictures in order to understand this. We don't need kindergarten programming in order to understand this. We're all adults here. Tell us it to us on the level that it's actually meant to be told us to, and then we'll understand it better. I'm just telling you the way that I see it working. Hopefully, everybody understands that, and we can move forward. Some people will see it and create new things. Some people won't see it and they're go under their dogma of the same old words. For those people who want to use the same old words, good luck. For those people who want to expand their mind and see things a bit differently, congratulations, and I welcome you in. We're going to get somewhere in this world, and it's only going to be by changing the way that we see things because we're seeing them wrong because they fundamentally reached an end of where you see them. And we now need to grow and progress to the next level, so we must fundamentally see them differently. With that said, thank you very much. Have yourself a great day. The old man Bill. The old man Bill. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds is broken in the head. People not seeing reality has put them in the red. Where conscious and spirituality been stricken from the norm and replaced with the ignorance of basic magnetic form. The geometry of God keeps running through his head. That's what makes old man builds broken in the head. The old man builds. The old man builds. Spheres of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to instead. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Fears of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time.
battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Hasn't forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds